My brothers and sisters in Christ, yesterday in my reflection, I spoke of the fact that Jesus, at the end of his dispute with the Jews at the end of John chapter 8, that it tells us he hid himself and went away. This is the penultimate exchange that he has with the Jews before his entrance into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. In fact, today we hear the last of those engagements. So after the events of John chapter 8, he leaves the temple area. And then in John chapter 9 is the episode of his healing of the man born blind that we heard on the fourth Sunday of Lent. After that, Jesus for the feast goes into the temple area and talks, and it leads to the final dialogue that we hear today in John chapter 10. At the end, they reject him, and he leaves. After this comes the raising of Lazarus, and then the words of expectation. Will he come for the feast? It sets up the event of Holy Week that we're about to celebrate. But what we see here is a final withdrawal, even from the previous one. Jesus is giving every chance as he proclaims the word, and yet he is finding steadfast opposition and rejection. Often in our lives, we can perceive God's absence as a fault on his part. Now, God is never absent to us, but our own perception of that absence often comes about due to our own rejection. Perhaps it's not an intellectual, outright rejection of God, but not only through our own sinfulness, but through our own pride, our obstinacy of heart, our unwillingness to listen, we can reject the overtures of God who constantly presents himself to us in grace. Then in turn, we'll ask, why is God hiding? Where is God? When in fact it is we who have held him at arm's length. It's important for us to remember that God does not force himself upon us. Despite the cost of the horrible things that we do with it, God gives us free will. As I've said before, without free will, there can be no love. Love can only happen in freedom. But because of free will, we have the ability to reject his overtures. And so God will not force himself upon us. If we reject God, he'll keep trying, but he will not come more strongly upon us. And so if we constantly reject listening to God, if we refuse to hear his voice, refuse to carry out his will, and instead seek our own ends at every turn, then we can't suddenly turn and ask, where is the voice of God in my life? We are the ones who have held him at bay. And so, may we examine in our hearts, where am I obstinate? Where am I covering my ears and refusing to listen to God? Where is he presenting himself and I'm slamming the door? Instead, may we now, while there is time, open that door and receive God for all that he has to offer. May God bless you all.